Ask Reddit. What simple piece of advice actually changed your life? I used to feel overwhelmed by everything I wanted to improve in my life: fitness, work, even learning new skills. I'd go all in for a week, burn out, and then beat myself up for failing again. It was like this endless cycle of frustration. One day I was venting to a coworker and he said something that stuck. Just aim to get 1% better every day. At first, it sounded like one of those cheesy motivational quotes, but he explained it differently. He said, think about it like this. If you try to improve everything at once, you'll crash. But if you focus on being 1% better, like doing one extra push-up, sending one more email, or spending 5 minutes learning something new, that adds up. By the end of the year, you're not just better, you're way ahead. So I tried it. I stopped trying to overhaul my entire life in one go and focused on small, consistent changes. Instead of committing to an hour at the gym, I'd do 10 push-ups before bed. Instead of grinding for hours at work, I'd aim to knock out one extra task. It felt small, but it was doable, and I didn't burn out. Fast forward a few months and things started to snowball. I was in better shape, my job felt less overwhelming, and I'd even picked up some new hobbies. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real progress. That 1% rule, it's the most practical advice I've ever gotten.
I was dating someone a few years back, and honestly, it felt like we were constantly butting heads. Every argument turned into this competition to see who could win. We'd both walk away feeling frustrated, and nothing ever really got solved. One day, during a particularly bad fight, my buddy, who'd been married for a couple of years, gave me a piece of advice that completely shifted my perspective. He said, in a healthy relationship, it's never you versus them. It's both of you versus the problem. If you're not on the same team, you're in the wrong game. At first, I brushed it off, but later, it stuck with me. The next time my girlfriend and I started arguing, I stopped mid-sentence and asked, what do we need to do to fix this together? She looked surprised, but it completely diffused the situation. Instead of pointing fingers, we talked about what we both wanted and worked through it. That advice didn't just save that relationship, it's something I've carried into every relationship since. Now, whenever there's tension, I remind myself, we're on the same team.
Your success in life is largely dependent on how many uncomfortable conversations you're willing to have. My former boss told me this after I was denied re-enrollment at my university to finish my degree. He encouraged me to take a day off work, drive to the university, and negotiate with them in person about the situation. As a naturally non-confrontational person, I would never have done this on my own, but sure enough, I spoke with the relevant offices and I was able to enroll. He repeated this line later when he had to lay me off due to financial constraints. Ironically, because of that same advice, I had already planned to leave the job anyway to attend school full-time.
Don't worry about controlling your emotions, control your actions. This was from my geometry instructor when I was a sophomore in high school. He was the kind of guy who spent 80% of class time discussing mathematics and 20% talking about life. He was an excellent teacher and one hell of a human being. The goal, I think, of parents in the area where I grew up was a kind of steely-eyed stoicism. Conceal your anger, ignore your lust, show no fear, show no weakness, be strong, strong, strong. Being awash in hormones, I could do none of those things, and I was beating myself up constantly. I think most kids in school were under the same pressure. His advice hit me right between the eyes. The experience of emotions is outside our control, but our response to them is not. Don't be ashamed of a feeling, but be ashamed if you act like an ass because of the feeling. That idea changed everything for me. I passed his insight on to my kids, and I still apply it to my own life decades later. Thanks, Coach, wherever you are.
The wise man, married for many years, gave his newlywed son this advice. One day, you are going to be driving home from the bar at 2 a.m., having missed dinner and never called your wife. Despite still being drunk, you will turn off the lights of your car and the engine and roll silently into the driveway. But no matter how softly you tiptoe up the door and silently enter the house, your wife will come running down the stairs screaming like a banshee demanding answers. Instead of trying to sneak in, rev the engine loud, come screaming down the street, and with the squeal of tires and brakes, pull into the driveway. Then stomp up the stairs and throw the door open so it slams into the wall and yell up the stairs, "Honey, I'm home and I'm ready for some good lovin'." I guarantee she will pretend to be fast asleep. A friend once told me, the secret to happiness is simple. Lower your expectations, like way lower. At first, I thought he was joking, but then he explained it. Most of the time, we're miserable because we expect things to go perfectly. But if you start expecting things to be a total disaster, you're either right or you're pleasantly surprised. I laughed it off, but then I tried it. The next time I had a date, instead of stressing about everything going smoothly, I told myself, she's probably going to hate my favorite band, my jokes won't land, and the food will suck. Spoiler alert. The date wasn't perfect, but we had a good time and I didn't feel half as nervous. Now, I'm not saying you should settle for mediocrity in life, but honestly, this little mindset shift has made me way less stressed. Your flight got delayed, expected, your team lost the game, totally called it, you find $20 in your jacket, boom, best day ever. Lower your expectations and suddenly life feels like it's full of surprises.
Lately, I've been trying to think less about how things feel right now and more about how they'll feel later. When I'm tempted to skip a workout, procrastinate on a project, or blow my budget on something dumb, I ask myself, what would future me want? Future me probably won't care that I was tired and skipped the gym, but he'll definitely care if my clothes stop fitting. Future me won't remember how fun it was to binge watch a show all day, but he'll be grateful I finished that thing I kept putting off. It's not about being perfect. It's about leaving the next version of myself in a slightly better spot. I know I can't control everything about the future, but I can at least give myself fewer problems to deal with. So, even when I don't feel like it, I try to do the thing. It's not glamorous, but future me will thank me, and that's enough to keep me moving forward.
When I was about 15, I answered an ad in a local paper about an elderly quadriplegic man needing assistance. Private care, CNA type work. I ended up working for him for the next 5 or 6 years. Fred had been in a car accident when he was in college, 1954 if I remember correctly. He broke his neck and severed his spine, leaving him paralyzed from the neck down. He told me he had 2 options: sit under the oak tree on his family farm and wait for death, or make something of himself. Fred chose the latter. He became a state legislator, an inventor, and an advocate for the disabled. One story he shared with me really stuck. He talked about going back to school after the accident and how much he was struggling. One of his professors told him something that stayed with him his entire life. The only measure of a man that matters is from the eyes up. That line still sticks with me even now. The hardships Fred endured, the struggles he faced, and the unbridled success he achieved despite it all, he was remarkable. Fred really was an incredible person. He took me and a buddy to DC once, arranged a meeting with a college president when I was graduating high school, and took me to my first collegiate football game. His alma mater at the time, now our alma mater. He taught me so much about politics. We used to watch Crossfire on CNN together. I was blessed to call him my friend. To answer a few questions, yes, Fred had a full head of thick, if silver hair, until the day he passed. Lucky bastard. The work wasn't too technical. I'd transfer him using a Hoyer lift to a rolling shower chair, help him use the commode, assist with hygiene and showering, then transfer him back to bed, fix him up, and leave. Fred had been disabled for over 4 decades. In his experience, younger people were more likely to commit to part-time work for low pay during the evenings. I worked from about 5 to 8 p.m. I think I earned about $70 a week, working 5 days a week. Not something many older folks would take on. Fred understood the creepy old guy seeking young help vibe the ad might give off, so he made sure to invite my parents over before I started working to show that everything was legitimate and above board. Love you, Fred. Rest in peace, my friend. I miss you, old man.
This is something I really struggle with. It's called maladaptive daydreaming, and while it seems harmless to daydream about certain things you'd like to happen, it can actually result in some serious problems. Believe it or not, Allowing your brain to feel a sense of happiness or accomplishment without actually doing anything will slowly train your mind that it doesn't have to work to get rewarded. Sure, the reward is small and insignificant and all in your head, but it is a reward. I do this all the time, and it's not good. I imagine scenarios, discussions I want to be able to have, jobs I wish I had, romantic moments I wish I had, and yet I don't do hardly anything to work towards those desires because my attention span, discipline, and ability to motivate myself has steadily been decreasing. This is how you develop depression. I'm on that road, but I'm thankful that I'm actually quite introspective and aware of the faults in my style of thinking. Don't fall into a habit of daydreaming. Every time you choose to daydream, you're probably making the chance of it becoming a reality even less. Find the first steps towards achieving your goal and start. I want to add one more thing. Don't let having some sort of eureka moment do the same thing. Many people have said they were positively impacted by this comment, and it warms my heart how many have told me so. But I want to warn people that this can also lead to a false sense of accomplishment. Get out there off the computer or smartphone and accomplish your goals for real.